Hey, hey, hey. I tried to do something new there, and I was like, it was like Fat Albert, like a horrible Fat Albert. Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. I am an acupuncturist and a coach, and I'm super excited that you're here. This is another installment on the When Ghosts Speak series. So a lot of great content here. I'm just so honored to be able to share this information with you, and I'm really glad that you're here. You can reach the show if you let me know what you think about it. You can hit me up on Instagram at James E. Rohr, that's R-O-H-R. Email the show at pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com, and you can check out my coaching work at invitinginlove.com. And hey, if you're enjoying the show, if you wouldn't mind going into iTunes now that we're back up and running there, leaving a 5-star review, writing something lovely about it. It really helps the show to get seen and for the message to get out. And especially with these When Ghosts Speak ones, really, really powerful messages that I hope to spread out across the world. So your reviews really help. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the show. Welcome to another edition of When Ghosts Speak. I know that you guys, from what I've been hearing, have been enjoying these episodes, and so I'm happy to share another little tidbit that I got as part of the downloads. For those of you that might be new to the show or have no idea what I'm talking about, a while back I started a series of podcasts called When Ghosts Speak. And this is from some experiences that I had where I felt like I was channeling. Perhaps I was just tapping into a higher consciousness. Maybe I was just giving myself permission to say things that I want to say without taking personal responsibility. But it didn't feel that way. I have a pretty good handle of when I want to just kind of be a jerk. And this experience was actually the exact opposite of that. As it occurred to me was that there were two entities that showed up sitting across from me, and they've communicated with me. They've kind of told me what to say, or I've been just transcribing their thoughts, and oftentimes they're answering a question that I might have. And today's talk, they touched on an idea that I had and was kind of bouncing around my head for a bit, and they just, kind of knocked it out of the park and brought a lot of clarity to it. And so I'm super stoked to share it with you, because what we're talking about here, what they're going to be talking about, are intrusive thoughts. And that's a phrase that I've always found to be interesting, and it comes up a lot when people are meditating. And the word itself, intrusive, seems to imply that there is like the expected level of thought, and then this unwanted visitor shows up, and it needs to be dealt with or grappled with or done away with. And in my acupuncture, my clinical work, and my coaching, I've seen the agony that these intrusive thoughts or the negative thoughts or the hard self-talk, that stuff that can happen. I've certainly been there. I've had it. I'm not immune to any of this stuff. And I found that this teaching about the intrusive thoughts is, I found it to be fascinating. Now, one of the things that you're going to hear a reference to is they talk about the amplifiers. And I think I've talked about it in here before, but the amplifiers that they're talking about are the three that they've let me in on so far, that they've really spelled out more clearly, are the heart and your voice and your actions. So when they talk about the importance of minding and paying attention to your amplifiers, that's what they're referring to. So the heart obviously is going to be like, what do you feel? What's on your heart? What do you come back to, when you're really in that kind of quiet space? What is the energy that's being amplified there? What is it that you're putting out? And, that one can get to be a little sticky, because sometimes, especially with this negative talk, it can feel like it's us. It can feel like it's the true us. We can feel shame. We can feel guilt. We can feel, just terrible. And so sometimes getting a read on the heart can be challenging, especially if you're just not in a good space. And they talk about that, and they're going to talk about it where the beauty of having these other two, it's kind of like the government having this distribution of power among the three branches, that if you're uncertain of what's on your heart, well, the good thing is we have got two other amplifiers that can help us out. So you've got your voice, what you speak creates life, creates that energy, creates that power and that vitality to whatever is happening. So even if you're not experiencing what you want to be experiencing in your heart, you can start giving voice to something else to create that. And then, of course, your actions. So maybe you're not feeling totally awesome, but you can start taking actions that have historically helped you to feel better or that are consistent with where you want to be. And so we've got these checks and balances. And the best way, the most kind of just also like the government, when things get done, is when all three are aligned. And so the same thing is true for us, that when we show up with our heart, our words, and our actions all in congruence, now you're really onto something. Now we're really feeling powerful. And I've used this, I oftentimes will come back to these things that when I'm not feeling good and when I'm working with clients, I'll say, okay, well, where might the breakdown be? And if it's not, if you can't generate a good mood right away, if you can't feel happy and uplifted in your heart, like after a breakup or, a date didn't go the way you wanted it to, or maybe you were let go from a job or, whatever. If you're not feeling that good there, you can be really mindful of the words that you speak. And then, of course, mindful of the actions that you take. And if two of the three of those things are aligned in the direction of where you want to be, well, now you're ahead of the game, right? It's just a matter of time until that other part of the triad gets on board. So when you hear them talk about amplifiers, that's what they're referencing. There's no such thing as intrusive thoughts. A good practice for you humans is to assume that everything that happens is for your benefit. This isn't really true because we don't differentiate between benefit and harm. Again, those are distinctions that are either correlated with a perception of linear time as you know it on your body and a belief in the finite of your soul. In the eternal sense of things, there just is. But a curious thing with your neurobiology is that when you just assume that everything is there for your benefit, it can kick you into a state of gratitude. And this gratitude is certainly a more fun place to be. The energy flows more easily, and you're more likely to connect with others. And since the premise of your initial question is specifically about love, assuming things are working for you is a good way to go. An intrusive thought will be viewed as intrusive because your mind has a set of principles or desires, and something else pops in that is contrary to that. Rather than assume that the so-called intrusive thought is there to derail your desires or to hold you back, what if that thought is the exact kind of resistance you need in order to expand your energy field so that you can actually hold or have the capacity to transmit and transduce the life you want? And as we explained, when you are meticulous with your amplifiers, what you speak, what you feel in your heart, and how you act, then any so-called negative thought will be a catapult into your desired life. Even if you're convinced that your negative thought lives in your heart, if you are meticulous with the words that you only speak of what is consistent with the life that you want, and if you only take actions consistent with that life and not the limiting belief or the intrusive thought, then you'll get where you want to go. A thought that says you're a piece of shit or that you don't deserve it could be there to guide you to the forgiveness you need to extend now, because the compassion you'll need when you have that partner or you become that manager or you own that franchise is going to be huge. Being able to forgive your parents or yourself is the exact skill you might need down the road. So transform that so-called intrusive thought. Be grateful for it. Do what needs to be done to have that thought move you toward your dream rather than fighting with it. A thought that says no one will ever love you is the perfect thought if you're committed to your dream. to build the foundation of beliefs that says that you are lovable. This thought can bring you to a level of self-awareness and of powerfully curating your self-esteem in a way that someone who doesn't have that thought may never have a rock-solid, intentionally crafted view of the self. Of course, the thought that says you're a piece of shit, and then you feel that in your heart, and you speak about how you're no good, and take action that is consistent with poor self-care, well, that isn't an intrusive thought either. That's a thought that seems to be calling out what is. The choice is yours. We've given you all the tools that you need. Assume that what might be negative is precisely what you need for your growth. You may not understand it, but you don't have to. This isn't about understand as much as it is about transform. Do you realize the power that happens when you overcome an obstacle to create what you want? It's the difference between earning something and having something be given to you. Those things that you think are negative are actually building you up. You are earning the new frequency at which you'll vibrate, and that will allow your heart to be more in more consistent resonance with it. You'll take more consistent action, and you'll speak of the process of overcoming hardship and claiming what you wanted. The more weeds you have to pull out, the more you'll appreciate what grows. This isn't to say that everything needs to be difficult. We just don't want to see you fight with yourself all the time. Your brains have been programmed to identify and be especially attached to weaknesses, failures, and difficulties. This is so that you'll learn, not so that you'll run away from your tribe or give up on your dreams or harm yourself. Over millennia of evolution, these warning and cautions are helpful, so be grateful. And also use the powerful triple amplifiers to not be beholden to the weaknesses and failures. What you want is exactly as things are right now. Otherwise, your reality would change. It's very possible that the inner critic, the voice that you try to wrangle, may be your greatest ally. In some contexts, this may be the only voice in your life that is actually telling you the truth. You had a client, Jim, a client that was hugging a partner when he heard the voice, "He's going to leave you." This client fought with that voice, but the voice wasn't wrong. Unless the client dies first, even in the best case scenario, chances are that he's going to leave him at some point. Without addressing the so what aspects, since we've already talked about the importance of moments and loving without attachment. But let's stay within the traditional concept. He wants his partner to be around. He's got no evidence that his partner intends to leave soon. There's no signs of impropriety. There's no historical indication of infidelity. And his partner has great impulse control. The voice in his head didn't say he's going to leave you tomorrow. It just said he's going to leave you. And it's probably right. The odds are that this is true. So fighting with it or telling yourself that the voice is wrong when what it says is a most likely event, fighting with it is a waste of time. Instead, the voice is reminding you of the impermanence of things. There's an opportunity there to squeeze your partner more tightly, to enjoy the nectar of life, to delight in this moment with a ferocity you might not have otherwise done. So you can use the inner critic to your favor, or you can let it beat you down, occupy precious time in a tug of war that doesn't accomplish anything. Or you can let it motivate you, inspire you, and initiate good action. If you don't like what that inner critic is saying, take different action. Take so much action, speak so much of the life you're creating, that when that voice comes up, you don't even have to respond because all of the words and evidence of your life is so clearly the opposite. When you stack so much evidence that the inner critic no longer applies, what used to be a fight becomes a laugh. But if an internal thought triggers some uneasiness, the uneasiness may be because it's speaking the truth. The bully who calls someone slow or fat or bad at reading is usually right. They're usually just presenting data. Obviously, the delivery is mean and the intent is not nice, but what they say is often correct. So don't try to argue with the merits of what they say. Take the feedback and make a change if you want a different outcome. Everything in life can be fuel or it can be a burden. That choice is up to you. But why do you think that we would have put these obstacles and bullies in your path or inside of you? So that you'd have a hard time? Everything is there to shape you so that you can do what needs to be done. But you must amplify the opportunities to feel good, to thrive, to live in joy. Otherwise, we'll begin to think that you enjoy feeling shitty, dealing with obstacles and staying stuck. It's your party. We just provide the venue and everything you might need to make it exactly as you want. So there you have it. What do you think? Anything there strike a chord? Maybe it's what you needed to hear. Now, obviously, if that inner critic is telling you to harm yourself, please don't. Reach out and get the help and the support that you need. But for those little voices, those little jabs, those little cuts that sometimes can pop up to us like paper cuts. They're little slights. It's like, what's that book, The Pilgrimage by Paulo Coelho? I love that book. I read it a long time ago. And if I remember right, he has this thing where the guy is walking along the Santiago de Compostela. I think that's what it's called. The sacred road there in the northern Spain. And he's doing the pilgrimage. And the suggestion was that the character gets a suggestion that says every time that you have a negative thought, or something that's not very nice, to take your index finger and take that nail and just press a little bit near the cuticle of the thumb as a physical reminder of the impact that voice has. And I think the character, by 4 hours into it, the thumb was already raw. And so those are the kind of those thoughts. Perhaps they are an ally. And I just absolutely loved this download where they were talking about, let's just assume that it's in your favor. Let's just assume that that's how it goes. Why assume that it's bad or that it shouldn't be there or that it needs to go away? It reminds me of one of my favorite things with coaching. My favorite coaching tips that I was given and that I share with my clients now is, if you want to feel better, ask yourself better questions, right? So if we keep asking ourselves why do I suck? Your brain's going to keep looking for that answer. But if you're asking yourself the question of how is this good for me? How is this helping me? That's a totally different question. The brain gets to start searching in a different part of itself, looking for an answer or response that's of a very different color, very different tone. I was talking with Jen earlier today. I was remembering one of the Native American ceremonies that I was fortunate enough to participate in. And it was the first time that I had done it for 4 days, where basically you're fasting, there's no food, not really any water, out dancing and praying and in the sun, and it's hot and it's difficult. This one in particular was really difficult for me. And part of why it was so difficult was because, I was suffering. I was having a hard time. I had a lot of these negative thoughts. The internal dialogue was really intense. But what I remember thinking was, at the end of the first day, and really the start of the second day was when I started to feel really bad. Because the first day you're like, yeah, I'm doing it. It's great. All the things. And then by the mid-morning on the second day, I was having a really hard time. So when I was dancing, maybe on the first day, my knees might have actually gotten up to about, waist high. And the second day, I could barely get my foot off of the ground. And there was hours where I felt like I was just going to fall over. And I kept asking myself the question, how am I going to make it 4 days? And as I think about it now, I can't help but laugh, because that's like the worst question I could have asked myself. I mean, I guess the worst question would have been like, how are you so awful? But that was kind of implied in the like, how am I going to make it 4 days? How am I going to make it 4 days? How am I going to make it 4 days? And, the brain may there have been like, well, we're going to like pace our energy, and we're going to pray harder, and we're going to, use the gift of our spirit guides, or like whatever. But it was so loaded with doubt. It was so loaded with this connection to when I feel weak and uncertain, and it just magnified all this kind of uncertainty in my life, and it all just became really focused on like, how was I going to make it 4 days, instead of like, I'm so excited to make it 4 days. I'm so thankful that I made it 4 days. I'm so thankful that this difficulty now is giving me exactly what I need to have to dance hard for the 4 days. But I couldn't see out of it at the time. All I could see was from where I was, this insurmountable, I don't know, whatever it was, 50 hours that was still ahead of me in this thing. And so part of what I loved about this particular download is that, it immediately offers that reframe from these things are bad for you, and it's just this part of yourself that needs to be expunged and purified, to, well, maybe it's actually giving you some accurate feedback. Maybe there's something there that is getting your attention. Maybe there's something here that's actually helpful for you. I think it also reminds me now of when I used to be super jealous. I think I've probably talked about this on the show, but it was something that really was crippling for so long when I was, in high school, and then dating in college, and probably thereafter too for a little while. I would just have all of this insecurity, all this jealousy would come up. And, jealousy is a nasty one, because it starts off as like, you're a piece of shit, you're not enough. And then it becomes like totally projected on somebody else. Like, surely they must be up to something. Surely they're desiring somebody else. And then it just kind of comes back to like, well, I'm a piece of shit. And it's just that loop, right? And finally I'd had enough. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, enough is enough is enough is enough. And I had this thought sort of arose after I had said enough, that was like, well, maybe this jealousy is actually here to do me a solid. Maybe it's here to help me. Maybe the universe is conspiring with this part of my consciousness that is like the only part of my consciousness that's going to get my attention, because we just tend we're not conditioned to just keep focusing on the good. It's not, biologically and from an evolutionary standpoint, and this is what they reference there too, right? Just if all you did was focus on the good stuff, like, we probably wouldn't have ever evolved to be here now. So inherent in the fear and the anxiety and these things and these kind of lower frequencies is it can help us to survive. And they're also great tools to get our attention. So if there was like this, benevolent spirit guide or angel or energy that just sort of flowed through you, you may not pay attention to it, or you may just be like, oh, that feels nice, like a nice breeze, but then it just kind of goes away. And it's not something that you ruminate on. It's not something that gets fixated on. And so just like I think with pain, I used to ask this all the time when clients would come in with pain. It's just to be like, well, what is this? What is the message that this pain is giving you? Because there's nothing like pain to hold your attention. It's going to hold your attention and disrupt the flow of your day way better than a nice, happy feeling. And so, the jealousy and the insecurity and anxiety, these things are the same way. And so for me, I was like, fuck, I can't do this anymore. All right, great. And I was like, well, maybe this is here for a reason. And I asked myself a better question. I said, well, how is this jealousy here to serve me? How might I have called it in, or how might the universe be giving this to me as part of my own development, as part of my growth? And so I was like, well, what is it that I'm jealous of? And so I made the list. I went through and I made a list. And I just, it was like 3 pages long. It was this huge list because I was just so full of my own insecurities. And I was like, well, okay, the stuff that I couldn't change, I just crossed it off. I said, I just put a boundary around myself. I was like, I'm not allowed to be jealous of this anymore because I can't change it. I can never be 7 feet tall. I'm not going to be, an Olympic athlete, most likely. Or like I couldn't be Indian. I couldn't be black. It's like I couldn't change those things. So let's just celebrate that there's variety in the world. And I was done with being jealous of that. And then there were the things that I identified on the list that were things that if I really committed to it, I could change. I could become that. I could allow it to fuel this transformation. And I'd look at guys with 6-packs or who were super fit, maybe people who were really well read with history. And I'd look at that stuff and I'd be like, well, okay, yeah, I could do it. I'd celebrate the fact that I thought that I could do that, but I wasn't interested in putting in the time and the energy. And so when I would see someone who's super fit, instead of being jealous, I would just be like, wow, that's amazing. That person really committed to it and they've done it. Like, congratulations. Let's celebrate that there are people out in the world who were different. And then what was left on the list were the things that I could do and that I was going to commit to. And the big one there at the time for me was playing the guitar. And as I look here in the podcast room and I've got, this guitar, and I was like, okay, this is great. And so I used that as a fuel to learn how to play the guitar. Now, I didn't go very far with it. I learned a few chords and some things, but it's enough for me to really enjoy expressing myself. And I just play for me. And it's been this nice thing, and that gift of music in my life is directly from my jealousy. So I can have tremendous gratitude to the jealousy because it brought me the gift of music. Because I'd be jealous of the guys that were playing that could, had good rhythm and could play and sing and do all that stuff. I'd be so jealous of it. And then finally, when I look at that list, it's like, no, I could do that. And so it took some work for sure. None of this came easy. And, those years that I was in that place of insecurity, totally sucked, right? Sabotaging relationships and just not feeling good and contracting my energy and full of doubt. And it's not fun. But when I started asking myself better questions, how might this be here to serve me? What is this jealousy pointing out in me that I really do want to transform? And like with last week's episode where we talk about the future self, perhaps some of these inner thoughts or the inner critic or those self-judgment stuff and the jealousy in this story, perhaps it was my future self trying to get my attention. Maybe it gave me a gentle nudge and I missed it because I wasn't being astute. I wasn't paying attention. And so it took being hit over the head with like a 2x4 of anxiety, jealousy, insecurity, doubt, clinginess, attachment in order for me to start paying attention to the precise changes that my future self was trying to get me to make. So if you're out there, like if you're hearing this and you're suffering and you've tried to keep like a calm state of mind and these voices are coming up, rather than fighting with it, because the one thing we know for sure is that when we struggle, we're just going to get more struggle. Instead of fighting with it, just bless it. My teachers used to talk about invite it into your energy field. Instead of trying to get it to go away, just bring it in and offer it some berries, some corn, some water, some meat. Make it some tea. Have a conversation with it. Why have you been sent here? How is this good for us? How can I grow from your presence in my life? And that's going to get you back to a state of equanimity and balance much faster. And I love how they talk about, using these amplifiers and having this kind of, this triangulation where if one part of you is feeling weak and uncertain, you can bring it back. So for some of you, a lot of the women that I speak to with the dating, they feel in their heart they're ready for the relationship. And they might have a hard time voicing it. And then they're not taking action, but the feeling is there. And it's like, okay, great. Now start speaking about how that relationship is inevitable for you. Feel it in your heart. Feel that inevitability. Speak about the inevitability. And then watch how the energy starts to shift and your universe starts to realign, your perception, your doors of perception change. And that action then becomes the next step because you've got those other two pillars that are going to take over. But when the two of the three things are not in alignment, then it's harder. It's more difficult. Be glad not three of them are. And so part of the way to get back online here is just to start saying, how is this here to serve me? How might the universe be working in my favor? And using this inner critic or this inner voice as a way to get my attention. And then if you can be grateful for it, then the struggle, the resistance goes away. And it just becomes awesome. Now how do we go out and do it? What are the changes that need to be made? And then if you haven't listened to it, go back to the last week's episode where we talk about that future self. Spend some time, connect to that future self. And maybe we just assume that our best version of us in the future is giving us all of these things now to hold our attention. It may have brought you to this podcast. It may have guided you to go to the iTunes store to give us a 5-star review and write an awesome thing there. Thank you in advance. I love that future self that's writing awesome things about the podcast. The universe might start be lining up for you. And the things that we think might be difficult or that we don't need might be precisely exactly the things that are going to get your attention. So I hope that you can head out into the world this week with that gratitude on your heart and start asking yourself a question, perhaps, of like this thing that seems challenging. How might this be here to serve me? How might this be here to help me? Why might my future self have brought this to me here now? Because the road from where I'm at to my amazing future self is inevitable. It's happening. You speak about it. You feel it in your heart. And then the actions that you take will be consistent with that. So there you guys have it. Thank you, as always, for checking out the podcast. I love to get feedback from you. Hit me up on Instagram at James E. Rohr. You can email the show at pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com. And if you're interested in hearing more about my coaching work, be sure to check that out at invitinginlove.com. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the spirits and the entities that blessed me with the download. And it's an honor to be a conduit for all of us. Thank you so very much, and I'll check you guys next time.